जिंदगी की है उसी के तक से है. Listen to the beat flute, how it tells a tale, complaining of separation. Saying, ever since I was separated from the meat bed, my lament has caused man and woman to mourn. I want a bosom torn by severance, that I may unfold the vein of love and desire. 'Tis the fire of love that is in the meat. 'Tis the fervor of love that is in the mind. Alright. I welcome you all on behalf of Sukhan Braey Aman. My name is Ashraf, and I am pretty much nobody at Sukhan Braey Aman. The basic aim of the organization, as the ones who joined us in the last gathering know, that it is a non-political and non-governmental organization which is trying to kind of put its contribution in the social arena, in the larger literary social scenario. We are just trying to explore different dimensions of our own culture in relationship with the other cultures which we have adapted over the years of time, over the years. I think I can all hear me because I'm not comfortable.
Your music on
The last program which we did as the organization to critically analyze a book and translation, a collection of translated short stories, which was written by Naeem Ashraf, and which were originally written by Ilyas. The name of the book we are going to discuss is Trespass, and the work which was originally created in Urdu was Naeem Ashraf. Both have its own, outline. All of you welcome Mr. Naeem Ashraf, because he's going to sit amongst the audience. Professor Dr. Munazza Yaqub is Associate Professor in the Department of English and founder and Director of Critical Thinking Forum, something I appreciate a lot, International Islamic University, Islamabad. And then moving on to something which is quite, a thing for me. We have a wonderful person who's going to join us today. Dr. Raja Muhammad Ikram Azam. Dr. Raja Muhammad Ikram Azam is the author of about 70 books in English, ranging from fiction and verse to research studies on Pakistan. His area of research ranges from geopolitics to strategic studies, international relationships, international relations, and politics. There is, so many things written on the paper that I can go on and on and on and on and spare the entire session introducing this person. So I'm going to stop here and I'm going to recognize my limitation. Sir, please. And then we have been joined by, I think, a wonderful personality, and I think that Naeem Ashraf is quite lucky to have, quite a heavy panel to discuss the book. We have Mr. Ilyas with us. Ilyas is a celebrated English language poet from Pakistan with some 20 verse collections to his credit. Heroism is well regarded as the elemental constituents of his verse, and he exploits as a brilliant academic, a civil servant, and a dedicated quasi-political celebrity. And I have again so much here to share, which I'm not going to, because I have to hold here, and I would like to thank you, my audience, who's here to,
listen if it is in you. But translating another writer, it's not only a great responsibility, it's a very challenging task. When we talk about translations, what we are looking at is that you need to writer comes from very particular background in that cultural context, and some of the things, like there is one instance where you have talked about wailing, and that is because it's very much part of our culture. But because of this scenario which we have seen in the past, burqa is used in English. So there are words which are now very much part of English language as well, and they are easily understood. So we need to see that when we are writing about our culture, and this is what I always, tell myself, that what's wrong if I carry the smell of this earth in my own way, and I put it the way it should be. क्योंकि मुझे सूंघी, मैं शायद वर्ड से सही ना बोल सकूं, लेकिन मुझे जो स्मेल होती है ना, जो मट्टी के उसके ऊपर मटके के ऊपर जब बारिश की बूंदें गिरती हैं और जो खुशबू होती है, उस खुशबू को भी कैरी करने के लिए दूसरी लैंग्वेज में कैपेसिटी होनी चाहिए, एंड दैट इज वेरी मच रिक्वायर्ड. Ramsha से उस दिन बात हो रही थी, and she was saying the literary idiom. That is what she said. Because translations, most of the time, I don't know really about the scene in Pakistan, but elsewhere in the world, it's given to writers who are very comfortable with both the cultures and both the languages. And that's why they are able to carry forward not only the literal, Trespass is one story which I read twice. Because, the pain of that child which is not alive.
Reading, I had Mashal's, face there in my mind. It was all the time haunting me. Sir, would you like to comment on? I just want the first personal impression of the short story.
First, the translation, the translator's intentions, declared intentions. And he has said in the preface, of course, I read the first paragraph because it's very relevant to understand what he's done. Completely translating a piece of fiction is close to impossible because every language has something more than words. What Sadiq was saying. That something is a combination of terminology, facial symbols, and colloquial accent that cannot be translated. However, effort can be made to convey the messages contained in a piece of fiction. I've made that effort. Meaning of home, the meaning and the message, I think you convey the message very well. And I'd like to say more of that later. But just a few words about the stories selected. Naturally, I was tempted by the title of the story, the book, The Trespass. It's a very touching story. It's a very imaginative story. It's a very sensitive story. Again, but on the whole, as I come through the pages, it's a very big challenge for creative writing. The temptation to be didactic. When we begin to preach demo fiction or creative writing, रहती फिर वो नस्ली वाज या खता बन जाती है. So there's a lot of that. But there are wonderful stories, human interest stories. एक और जो था story, and I pass this book to you to see jokers. I would like to retitle this as The Hypocrite, but it's an impossible story to believe because there's no redemption in it. The hero, he may be a rascal, but to a he lives up to his reputation, and even towards at the end of his life, you know, the way he convinces why a Hindu girl he had no and all that. It's a very unrealistic, possible character to believe. I may be wrong, and the fault is not yours. The fault, if any, is with the author. Again, we are a society of a polarized society between one extreme and another. And many of us, people like us, modern Muslims, you can say, we like to prove that we are secular. We don't have to prove that. It's enough to say that we are Muslims, modern, moderate, enlightened, or whatever terms you want to use. There's a lot of patriotism in the themes of the stories also. Now, to the theoretical aspect, I follow Raza. Just as मैंने पहले अर्ज किया, creative writing, translation, both are an art, a skill, and I would say even a science. One of my students, Dr. Naeem, she did a PhD in translation studies. And she's now in America doing a postdoctoral work. David Shakur. Now, what we need really is, in university schools and colleges, to teach the art and the skill, both of creative writing and translation. Your translation, although you've conveyed the meaning and message very well, but it has tended to be literal rather than idiomatic. And then, फिर मैं अंग्रेजी की बात करूँगा कि there are several Englishes in Pakistan. फौजी अंग्रेजी, जर्नैली अंग्रेजी, civil अंग्रेजी, civil servants की अंग्रेजी, judiciary की अंग्रेजी, asatza की अंग्रेजी, students की अंग्रेजी, researchers की अंग्रेजी. And there's a lot of confusion. And yet, none of that my generation and people after me, they bear me out that we miss the good old standard British English. Not in terms of accent and pronunciation, it has to be educated Pakistani English accent and pronunciation, but in terms of writing. There are many faults with our English as we see. Just use of the syntax. अब उर्दू का जो अस्लूब और लिखने का अंदाज और sometimes it's the reverse of English. Syntax, punctuation, the article. We need to teach minimalistic language. We are confused way to use the definite article and then to use A or B and so forth. And another thing, I've discovered that among our students and our teachers, ladies are the best. Hats off to them. जनाब ढूंढ के कोई बात हो रहा लड़का मिलेगा, मैं अंग्रेजी के हवाले से बात कर रहा हूँ. कहते हैं ना कि and I'm glad to see that there are a lot of younger generation over here. कहते हैं कि the future belongs to the youth. Well, I'm not so hopeful, क्योंकि अगर आपने हमारे यूथ को देखना है, जज करना है, मार्केट प्लेसेस जिन्ना सुपर वगैरह वगैरह, लड़कियाँ क्या तो लड़के क्या, they are lost generation. They are confused between east and west. और अब जो हमने दिन हुई है एक सामने टीवी पे फरमाया करके, अब जो हमारे रवायत हो रहे हैं बड़े कुछ आई हुई है टीम के साथ, तो ये ना हो कि आइंदा हमारी नस्लें भी बदल जाएगी और बिगड़ जाए और हमारे तीखे लाभ जो है ना वो चलते हो जाए. Anyway, thank you very much. Thank you for bearing with me.
I would request Mr. Ashraf to... no sir, you have mic.
وَالْعَدْلُ وَالْإِحْسَانُ, an exhortation for adl and ihsan, justice and social justice and equity. So, why did I begin with this verse? I'll just explain in a moment, but Ramshadji, if I did not congratulate you for such a wonderful name of this organization. An organization that believes in human expression for the sake of peace. But I want to leave a thought here with you and this organization that peace can be a very tricky thing if it is not based on justice, adl and ihsan, which is equity. And I think that there are three things. Talking after my elder, Dr. Ikram Aman, is not an easy business, but I will take the liberty. Sir, I honestly believe that if you really and truly want peace, there are three prerequisites. One is the pursuit of justice in society. The other is the pursuit of equity in society. And the third is very interesting. The third is a habit of contemplation, a habit of self-examination. Did not Socrates say that only an examined life is worth living? So when you start examining yourself and whether you are playing any role in the realm of justice and equity in society, only then you can have it. So I congratulate you that this consciousness is being spread through a wonderful title. But then, today's book and today's short story writer and today's translator are actually in the realm of justice and social justice and self-examination and contemplation of a human being towards these ends. And that is why I think that the subject of today is very close to the title that is there. So having done that, let me say that this is a writer who is fundamentally a believer in art for the sake of reforming human beings and human society. I think if we leave that out, then we miss out the whole book. I know that, was it Goethe sir who said that what is lost in translation is the real poetry. But here, what has been gained in the translation is the real prose which the author has. And I want to congratulate him. And what is that? That is the message, more important than the messenger, more important even than the language, more important even than the phraseology, is the message of the book. And I think the writer is totally committed to that message, and he has been able to present that message in a particular way. That message, sir, when I read the whole book, I've gone through your stories, is a homage to the dignity of human beings. You may be poor, you may be rich, you may belong to any creed or caste or color, but is your dignity respected in society? I think that is the message of the book, and I'm reminded of Rumi's magnificent words, "Ba khabar sho az muqam adami, adamiyat ehtaram adami." So you know this is a just in case you think that I'm provincialistic or easternistic, let me quote from Walt Whitman also, who says that who degrades another degrades me, and whatever is done or said returns at last to me. So you know this is a universal human thought. Now, sir, reform of society is only possible if a book, a piece of art, because, sir, frankly, I am not a believer in art totally for art's sake. A society in which human beings have no value and dignity, what will art do to that society, sir? So therefore, I believe that this book is useful because of the message that the basic function of art is to understand the function of life, is to function the being that is in human beings, the beingness of human beings. And sir, there are only two. I have learned over my reading and over my existence that there are only two attitudes towards life. One attitude can be summed up in this verse. And certainly if I take too much time, just stop me. I go and sit on the chair. Because I'm looking at you also. I'm organized with great responsibilities. So the first verse which reflects an attitude and which we civil servants generally have, I'll be very honest with you, I've spent 40 years in the civil service. वो आए हैं हम दुनिया में हम कुछ काम करने के लिए, कुछ खुदा से और कुछ बीवी से डरने के लिए. This is one attitude, the civil service attitude, my attitude. This is how we spend our lives at a superficial level, pleasing relatives, pleasing people. What is the other attitude? The other attitude is कि दर्द दिल के वास्ते पैदा किया इंसान को, वरना ताक के लिए कुछ कम न थी करूबियाँ. No, sir, I know that reform, which is the central focus of my friend Ilyas, that again, there are 3 or 4 attitudes, and I'll sum them up for you, and you will see which is the attitude which silently, skillfully, mercifully, the author presents to the audience. The first, of course, I call the attitude of Mitti Pao. This is a famous principle adopted by Chaudhry Shujaat Sahab, full marks for him. That whenever there is a talk of reform, well, use 50 bow, there is no need for it, status quo is fine. Let's look that attitude. The second one is, sir, I call waiting for Godot. There is this famous play by Beckett, Thomas Beckett, and the man solves nothing. He sits there, he is waiting for a being called Godot for the answer. And sir, that is with us also, Ibn Maryam, dua kare koi, or mere dukh ki dawa kare koi. Somebody else should come. The Masihas should come from the sky. We will just sit on the chairs. And that is, so this is the second attitude to reform. Then sir, you have the third attitude. That no, this life is meant for maximum corruption. This life is meant for maximum gain. This life is meant for maximum selfishness. And after me, let azab comes, but let me enjoy it. How beautifully put that I, kuch ab, kuch sharab aaye, aur uske baad aaye jo azab. So this is another attitude. No, is that the attitude presented in this book? No, sir. The attitude of reform, the attitude towards the function of a human being, the attitude towards the purpose of human existence. Nice time, he has taken his daughter to the hospital and they are having such a nice childbirth while this lady is dying in the name of Parda. And when there is shrieking, he tells his wife, put a chadar in your mouth so that the Parda, the sacred Parda. Wonderful, wonderful satire. But sir, more than satire, another thing, realism. One of the characteristics of this book is that it follows the school of realism. And I know that the progressive movement, of which there are echoes in this, was a movement which came away from romanticism and worked through the channel of realism. And therefore, I think that realism is very important. Then sir, I like the short story of Prestige, in which there is a patron-client relation between the Sardar, again a kind of ustad, and the man who is fighting on behalf of the Sardar. And you know sir, in the end the Sardar has compromised with the government and this man is still fighting with his Kalashnikov. And you have put it very well, soldier. Many people will say that you have tried to please the soldiers. No sir, even the soldiers have a heart. Here is a soldier who explains things nicely to the rebel. And you know the rebel hands over the Kalashnikov and he says, give me more halwa to eat. Very realistic stuff.
Thank you much for your I'd like to question Mr. Shastra, Marakalak Sarishta Tazara Mahanisas. I would like to share an abstract from the book because I designed a different format and he was right. I tried to transgress, in fact, in my limited vision, and I thought that it's going to be a critical discussion, or maybe panels are going to take up one point, and then they're going to analyze. But I'm really glad that it took their time. I would like to share this abstract, and I would like to have Dr. Yaqub's opinion about it. And then before I move on with the abstract, there is this question from the translator, which he asked me to peculiarly raise. He wanted to know that, peculiarly from Professor Yaqub, that is it a kind of work which could be put forward towards the students who are literature specific students who are doing their specialization in literature. Does it fulfill that literary merit? And he would want to know your opinion about it. I'm going to share this abstract from Trespass, and this is again taken from the story The Trespass. Members of Graveyard Committee looked perplexed. Whose son died? Someone asked. Is he a migrant or a native? Another question. His tone and tenor is quite different from that of ours. Though he has settled here for the last 2 decades on account of his occupation, yet he is another sect. They concluded that Father of the Dead is out of the defined boundaries, I would like you to comment on that as well, of their belief system. They regretted that the burial of deceased could not be allowed into their graveyard. It amounted to trespassing. But I had no sect, I had not annoyed anyone, I did not speak any objectionable, I hadn't committed any infidelity, I had not said a single word. Even I could not cry properly after my birth. Had I got a longer life, I would have followed the similar beliefs which those people followed. My thoughts were not different from theirs, and I would have spoken in their tone and tenor. There is a specific reason to share this abstract, even when the format is quite changed and transformed and evolved, and I'm glad that it is. But all of you must have noticed that we are reminded of a similar kind of event that happened in recent past. A student was brutally killed in a university. And while I was reading the story, the face of that student, Mashal Khan, kept haunting me. And somehow I couldn't, miss out on this point. I would want everyone, because this is how I designed the entire, panel discussion. I would want everyone to put one comment into it. But before that, I would like to invite Professor Dr. Munaza Yaqub to share her feedback and impression about the work. Thank you.
Ram Azam is literally my teacher. When I was doing my PhD, he taught us some courses. And later on, he also helped us to grow as a researcher and a scholar. Thank you very much. It's really a hard job for me to speak in their presence. But thank you, Ramsha, for giving me a direction to speak. And to begin with, first of all, I congratulate Ashraf for undertaking this task. Translation or doing translation of a literary work is a very, very complex task. It's not an easy process. Because sometimes the different journalistic works or the works in the sciences, it's easy to translate them. Because most of the time you are transferring literal meaning from the source text to the target text. Source text means the original text from where you are translating, and the target text means the text in which you are putting that translation. In this case, the source text was the Urdu collection of short story by Ilyas, and the target text is Naeem Sah's translation, the selection of short stories. So journalistic and scientific and the other text, it's easy to translate them, comparatively easy, because you are literally translating the literal meaning and the information and the content, the message, the content from one language to the other language. But when we come to literary translation, it is almost impossible. Through all the theorists in the world, they agree on this, that the translation of literature, of poetry, it is impossible, even of short story and novellas and novel. It's a very, very hard work. Because what you do when you are translating a literary work, you are not transferring the meaning actually from one language to other language. You are not transferring the contents only from one language to the other, or the message from one language to the other. No. It involves the transmission and the transference of those cultural nuances, intricacies, that sociological context, historical, political context in which the text was produced, and above all, the psychological and cognitive process which are involved in the creation of an artistic work. So it's a very hard process. What happens in literary translation, my experience as a teacher of comparative literature, I teach comparative literature in which we mostly rely on the translated work because I don't know and the students don't know the languages. So we take the translations and we study. But even if it's only the translated work and our exposure is limited to the translation, then it's fine. But when we know both of the languages, then it happens with me and the students, I think for the last 1 decade, 10 years, we have been experimenting this, that when it happens that we know both of the languages, then the translating work, hardly there has been any work which inspires us as the real work, the real original literary production. There has always been a sense of alienation. There has always been a sense of superficiality. There is always a sense of something lacking in that. Not something, a lot is lacking. So a literary taste and a literary flavor which you enjoy in the original text, in the original line, the translated line fails to do it. But sometimes the translated line is far beautiful than the original word because the translator has taken the translation to some other stages. Now, why it happens, why we feel this alienation, why we feel this lack and dissatisfaction and the translated work does not appear to us as an original literary work, it does not inspire us. The reason is that literal meaning are translated on the letter because it's just the transference of the lexicon. You choose selected words, selected phrases which are easily translatable, you translate them in another language. At the level of lexicon, it is possible. We get the message, we get the story, we get the summary. But what about those cultural processes? What about that historical, political context under which that text was written? Is the translator aware of that? Has he undergone that experience? In most cases, no. What are those cognitive, intricate processes which a writer or a creative artist undergoes when he is creating a piece? No, the translator doesn't have this experience. Now, when War and Peace was translated, the translator stayed with Tolstoy for 1 decade. He learned Russian language for 10 साल उसके साथ रहा. Whatever he was translating, he was conversant with him. So when you read the translated War and Peace, not in Russian, you don't feel it is a translated work. But even then, certain spaces are there where you feel it's there. And then, so what is the solution? What the translator theorists say? They say that we have to agree upon that it's not possible to translate one literary work into another language. So the translators have to seek equivalence. The theory of equivalence does not mean taking the literal translation of the word, the phrases and the idioms and going to the dictionary, going to the other such sources and finding the appropriate or the nearest meaning. No, you don't need to do it. Because when you will be doing it, Urdu language has its own cultural, historical, literary culture. It has its own taste. It has its own tradition. Because the tradition of subcontinent and Pakistan, society, culture, everything. English language is a Western culture. The Western sociological cultural processes, their own. So the context of both languages is very different. So when you pick up the Urdu words and you just go to the dictionaries and you just try to figure out the synonyms, you are actually just transferring the message, the summary. You are not transferring that literary flavor, the literary essence. So when I say that the translators, then they agree, or the theorists, they agree that there should be the equivalence instead of translating the language. Now what is equivalence? Equivalence means that if you go to the dictionary and you find the meanings in other language and you feel that this meaning is not conveying what है, अब चांद रात का moon night क्यों नहीं हो सकता? देखिए ना, अहमद अली ने जब नॉवल में लिखा तो उसने उसको चांद रात लिखा and you understand, मिलाद तो मिलाद ही हो सकता है. But so equivalence means if you don't get that meaning and you feel that this English word is not going to convey that sense, leave the exact meaning. See, we have to go to the idioms. We have to go some other contextual equivalence, and that equivalence means that you have to add certain things and you have to omit certain things. Translator then use this liberty of omitting the certain details which are
I have this afsana originally written by Muhammad Ilyas. He's among us, he's sitting here. Sir, आपकी इजाज़त से I just want to read a paragraph. एक paragraph मैं इस अफसाने से पढ़ना चाहती हूँ अगर आपकी इजाज़त हो. This is from और बात. Pardon my Urdu, अंग्रेजी and Punjabi because मुझे अभी भी समझ नहीं है कि मेरी ज़ुबान क्या है. सबीना दबी दबी हंसती हंसते हुए लाउंज से निकली. उसी लम्हे माँ सर पर आकर खड़ी हुई और निगाहों से बेटी को देखकर बोली, तुम कब सीखोगी? मुलाजमों से फ्री मत हुआ करो. कॉन्वेंट की एजुकेशन से तुम पर खास असर नहीं हुआ. इस गधी ने भीगा हुआ हाथ मार्बल स्लैब पर रख दिया और तुम उसके सामने माँ का मजाक उड़ा रही हो. शाजिया उठी और मचल के माँ की तरफ खड़ी. बेटी वो दो कदम हटकर पीछे हटकर बेजारी से बोली, हटाओ ये चोंचले, खामखा शर्मिंदा करा. बेटी बाज न आई और माँ से लपक कर बाजू गले में डाल लिया. कहने लगी, अम्मी खालू जान तो गलत नहीं कहते कि हम भी छोटे मोटे जागीरदार हुआ करते थे, बकौल उनके अंग्रेज हाकिमों के कुत्ते नहलाने वाले. सबीना में आखिर खराबी क्या है? अच्छी तरह आपकी हिदायत पर अमल करते हुए पाँव धोकर नंगे पैर अंदर आती है. फर्श धोने माँ ने दुरुस्त लहजे में टोकते हुए कहा, तुम्हारे खाने का दिमागी तवाज़ुन ठीक नहीं. जाली इनकलाबी लोगों की तवज्जो हासिल करने के लिए फजूल बकबक करता रहता है. शाजिया ने तस्बीह तैयार करने के बजाय माँ को खींच लिया और कहा, लेकिन हम भी अभी जिस मुल्क में छुट्टियाँ गुजार कर आई हैं, खासकर बर्तन वगैरह जिनमें हम खाते पीते रहे, वो किन लोगों के छुए हुए थे? बेगम जलाली को तब चढ़ गई, झंझला कर बेटी के बाजू झटक दिए. ताहम इतना ही कह पाए. इजिप्ट वो और बात है. So I would like to sum up whatever is discussed here on this paragraph from the original work. Somehow I feel that whenever we talk about translation in a bilingual culture, because we follow Urdu, we follow English, and as you have rightly mentioned, कि हमारी अंग्रेजियाँ भी बहुत सी अंग्रेजियाँ हैं और हम सब एक दूसरे पर हंसते हैं क्योंकि उनकी अंग्रेजी हमसे कहीं ना कहीं मिलती नहीं है, या हम कहीं ना कहीं अंग्रेजी को एक्सप्लॉइट करने की कोशिश करते हैं एक एजुकेशन क्लास में, एक कैपिटल में. I always had this doubt that why do we need to translate the word in a language जिससे हम लोग डसे हुए हैं, जिसकी हम लोग बातें करते हैं कि वो colonization का phenomenon है. But again, Dr. Yaqub summed it up beautifully. I don't want to take much time. I have the author with me, Colonel Naeem Ashraf is sitting amongst us, and I feel that it is blasphemous if I don't ask him over and I don't ask him to share his views and his journey about the entire, experience. How did he decide to translate Muhammad Ilyas's short stories? Because and Khadija Mastoor.
I am also thankful to Professor Dr. Ehsan, Mr. Ilyas, Dr. Naeem, Ms. Ashraf, for gracing the occasion by their presence in this somewhat pleasant afternoon in Islamabad. I am also thankful to them for giving their candid opinion on my translated short story work. Ladies and gentlemen, I belong to a generation that was lucky to have been born in a peaceful and harmonious society. But right in our teenage, we saw this society turning into sectarianism, extremism, and infighting. This is not the forum to dilate upon reasons behind such change paradigms. Let us leave it to the political leadership and the state institutions for them to have new narratives and make new policies. These reasons are internal as well as external. My concern is my new generation who are sitting here. They need to read fiction like this. The fiction that talks of tolerance. Tolerance for others' belief system. Love for people as human beings. Respect for teachers, elders, and above all, the law of the land. They need to be told by parents not to lynch their fellow students on basis of doubts, not to take law in their own hands. I selected these stories that have a message of rejecting hatred, hypocrisy, and dual standards. Stories that send messages of rejecting all kinds of shackles that cause agony for humanity. Stories that negate suppression of all kinds. Stories, some stories of Ilyas also talk of tribal traditions which have not been mentioned by the speakers, but those are also realities of life, like vulvar and some traditions where still the women are sold and purchased. They have to be brought into mainstream. They have to be brought into 21st century. However, some stories talk of natural human needs. Those cannot be and should not be suppressed. However, these should be met within accepted social norms and with due regard for others' feelings and rights. Bertrand Russell said, and I quote, "The best life is inspired by love and driven by knowledge." I am thankful to Ilyas for allowing me and guiding me throughout to translate his afsanas, which are masterpieces of fiction today. I am thankful to Sukhan Braey for his guidance. And above all, I am thankful to all my youngsters, my friends. I always feel energetic and young while I am with you. And at the end, I want to leave message for my young friends, and it is Ghalib's verse. رواداری بشرط استواری اصل ایمان ہے. رواداری بشرط استواری اصل ایمان ہے. مرے بت خانے میں تو کعبے میں بھارت کرنا ہے. تھینک یو ویری مچ. Thank you very much.
So much, Mr. Naeem. And I appreciate your quoting Dr. Russell, but we have Shah, we have Shah with the Fadai and many more here in our native and indigenous culture to be quoted and to be explored. I would request Mr. Ihsan Danish to give Ihsan Akbar, sorry, Ihsan Danish. میرے ابا ہمیشہ احسان دانش کو کوٹ کیا کرتے تھے اور میرے دماغ میں آج بھی وہی گھوم رہے ہیں. احسان اکبر to please share his views and conclude the entire ceremony as well.
Great people to fly with. Ihsan, thank you very much for the compliments. If I am credited with Ihsan Danish, that's the height of the
Thank you, sir.
میں جب چھوٹا تھا تو احسان دانش کی کتاب آتش خاموش میرے چچا مرحوم کی لائبریری میں تو میں نے سوچا کہ یہ اگر میری ہے تو مجھے اسے رکھ لینا چاہیے. میں نے اسے اپنے بستے میں رکھ لیا. چچا نے وہ کتاب پھر نکال لی اور لائبریری میں واپس رکھ دی. میں نے دوسرے دن پھر وہاں سے نکال کے بستے میں رکھ لی. تو میں بڑا خوش ہوا آپ نے جو کمپلیمنٹ دیے. احسان دانش تو میرے خوابوں میں کیا بڑے آدمی تھے. اگر میں ایک شعر ان کا سناؤں تو اسے بے تمیزی نہ سمجھا جائے کیونکہ انگلش ٹیسٹ کے اندر قبر کا گریو یارڈ کا ذکر کرنا اچھا نہیں سمجھا جائے.
کیا شعر ہے.
لیکن ہم لوگ تو مشرقی ہیں. کہتے ہیں since I shall have to recite some couplets in Urdu, Persian and English, by discussing it, which come to my mind. یہ جو کتاب ہے الیاس صاحب کی ہے اور وہ ایسے ہیج میئرس ہیں پیچھے رہنے والے ہیں. پرسوں ایک جلسہ تھا یہاں پر مقتدرہ ہم انہیں اسٹیج پر بٹھانے کی کوشش کرتے رہے. وہ محبوب ظفر پہلے کہہ گئے پہلے بات بتائیے لیکن یہ نجم محمد والی بات یہ تھی ویسے نہیں ہے. آج ان کی کتاب کا ترجمہ جو ہے یہ بڑی عزت کی بات ہے. کسی بھی کتاب کا کوئی ترجمہ ہے ہم نے دور لگا دی لکھتے ہوئے ہماری کتاب میں ترجمہ بڑے اعزاز کی بات. کسی بڑے آدمی کی کتاب کا ترجمہ ہو تو ان کی کتاب کا ترجمہ آج کے وہ بھی دور آتے ہیں اور کرنل صاحب بھی دور آتے ہیں. میں دونوں پر حیران ہوں یہاں نہیں بیٹھے بڑے لوگ جو ہیں. میں نے ایلیٹ کی کتاب نظم کا ترجمہ کیا لو سانگ آف جے الفریڈ پرفراک. مجھے معلوم ہے اس نے کتنے زمانے میں نے لیا. اس سمے آسمانوں کی میزوں کے دیوار شیشہ مقبول حالت میں چرچے اب مجھے آسمانوں کی میزوں کا کنسپٹ نالج سے لے کر اسے اردو میں لانے میں بڑی ہی مانتا ہے. آپ ایک وفاداری آپ کی اپنی زبان کے ساتھ ہے جس میں آپ کریٹ کر رہے ہیں جس میں آپ ترجمہ کر رہے ہیں. ایک وفاداری آپ ایک جیسی سنسیرٹی اس کے ساتھ اور اس کے ساتھ یہ بڑا نازک ہے. جن لوگوں نے 2 بیویاں کی ہیں اور ایک کی ہے وہ شاید ہم کوئی بیوی کے محبت کے قابل ہی نہیں لیکن میرے ترجمے کو جانتی صاحب نے بڑا پسند کیا. انہوں نے مجھے بتایا کہ یہ ترجمہ تو میں نے 3 آدمیوں سے کرایا اور تینوں کا مجھے پسند نہیں آیا اور انہوں نے 3 بڑے نام کا پسند کیا کہ انہوں نے نیا والوں میں چھاپا. پھر اس کے بعد انہوں نے اصرار کر کے مجھے ویبسٹرز انگلش اردو ڈکشنری کا جب ترجمہ کرنے لگے تو اس بورڈ میں مجھے شامل کیا. میں نے کہا حضرت میں تو لیکسیکوگراف نہیں ہوں. کہنے لگے نہیں یہ اس میں ڈکشنری کرنے میں کوئی اسپیشل تربیت نہیں ہوتی. دیکھو تم شاعر ہو اور شاعر سے اچھا لفظ کو کون جانتا ہے. میں نے کہا حضرت میں نہیں سمجھ رہا آپ نثر لکھنے والے آپ سے اچھی نثر اور لکھتا آپ سے بہتر کون کرتا ہے. نثر میں کو پتہ نہیں چلتا کہ ہم نے جو لفظ لکھا ہے اس کی ادائیگی کیا ہے. شاعر تو اسپوکن ورڈ بھی لکھتا ہے ریٹن ورڈ بھی لکھتا ہے اور شاعر کو معلوم ہے کہ حرف جو ہے اس کا کون سا زبر ہے کہاں پر سکون ہے. لکھنے والے کو تو پتہ ہی نہیں ہے اس نے لفظ جو مجرد لکھا ہے وہ مجرد ہے یا مجرد ہے یا مجرد ہے. اس نے ایک لفظ پڑھا کتاب سے لکھ دیا کہ آپ ہے کہ لفظ کے نفاذ ہوتے ہیں. پھر آپ لفظ کو تخلیق کرتے ہیں خیال کو پیش کرنے کے لیے. اصل لکھنے والا تخلیق کرتا ہے. تو اصل میں لفظ کو تخلیق کرنا اور صحیح لفظ کو چننا صحیح لفظ کو ادا کرنے کے لیے یہ ہے اوگٹ بھارتی ترجمے. حالی کہتے ہیں کہ شاعری کرتے ہوئے دیکھیے اب جب اس کے اندر جو تکلیفیں صحیح جا رہی ہیں جو رات کو جاگنے کا عمل ہے جو دن کو دھکے کھانے کا عمل ہے غریبوں میں اور جو محلے کے لوگوں میں بدنام ہونے کا عمل ہے تو یہ صحیح لفظ چننا ہی ترجمہ ہے. یہ جو صاحب نے کہا ان کی نظر کا نام ہے. مجھے یاد ہے اس کتاب کا ترجمہ انہیں پسند آیا. کسی پولش ایڈیٹر نے ان کا انٹرویو دیا تو انہوں نے میرے والا ترجمہ جو ہے پنجابی شاعری کے بعد میں دیا. حالانکہ ایک پولینڈ ہی کے آدمی نے ترجمہ اس کا ہی کیا ہوا تھا پنجابی شاعری کا. ایسا ان کا مصرع ہے آج رات تے امرت تے جام مانگو آج رات تے امرت تے جام مانگو ان ہتھاں نے یار نو پی دیتا ہے. مجھے یاد ہے کہ میں نے اس کا ترجمہ کیا تو اس کی ملاقات کی تھی آئی ٹیسٹ بھارت کی مواصلت ہے. انہوں نے کہا کہ جو تم نے بریک کہا اس سے وہ جام کی بیماری ادا ہو گئے شراب کی بیماری ادا ہو گئی. اچھا ترجمے کے ساتھ اس زبان کا کلچر آتا ہے. اب یہ ناممکن ہے کہ جس زبان کی چیز کو میں ترجمہ کر رہا ہوں اس کے ساتھ اس کا وہ کردار جو ہے وہ محسوس کر سکے. ضروری نہیں ہے کہ اس کو ویسے ہی انگریز بننا پڑے جیسے انگریز نے بات کی تھی اور آپ اس کا تو یہاں پر بہت زندگی سے تعصب کو کرنے کے لیے میں ذرا ایک منیرالدین صاحب ایک ہے جو اپنے امیر کے کہے میں ہیں اور وہ اسی شریعت میں ٹھیک بتاتا ہے جس میں پردہ جو ہے وہ کسی صورت دور نہیں ہونا چاہیے اور حتیٰ کہ مریضہ جو ہے جان اس کی نکل جائے تو بھی وہ مرد کے سامنے ڈاکٹر کے سامنے نہیں آنی چاہیے. تو یہی اس کی جو ہے اسے جب وہ تکلیف ہوتی ہے کرتے سے ہے تو की बात है, बस थोड़ा जो ले जाए की आवाज़ें आती हैं, होने लगी send another neighbor to look for Hazrat Sahab. On reaching the prayer site, the messenger informed that Hazrat Sahab is busy in hospital and has neglected to lead funeral prayers. Hazrat Sahab ने कि आवाज़ लार करती जानी चाहिए और उसके मुँह में कपड़े दोस्तों से मारते। ये जो तर्जुमा है, जैसे मैंने बताया कि तर्जुमे की एक किस्म है और कहानी के अंदर भी एक किस्म मौजूद है। इनके मौजूद क्या है, इनके जिन चीज़ों ने तकलीफ दी इलियास साहब को, वो मौजूद हैं गवर्निंग, सुपरस्टिशन, ऑनर कॉन्शियसनेस, शरीयत की बड़ी तकियानुसी इंटरप्रिटेशन, जदीद ज़माने में होते हुए करीब कई ज़माने के कन्वर्टेशन उनके सामने। तो कहीं उनका शक है, कहीं हालात को, कहीं ये आज की जिंदगी की तमाम मौजूदात हैं जो जीवन के सामने हैं। तो कुछ हमारे कॉम्प्लेक्सेस हैं और कुछ जो कॉम्प्लेक्सिटीज है वो मौजूद है। हमारे कैंपस, हमारे इन अफसानों के अंदर इलियास साहब ने बेहतरीन से उनकी शराफत की और उतनी ही हिम्मत के साथ उन्होंने उनको मुनासिब जुबान में अंग्रेजी में बयान किया। मैं दोनों को ये होनी चाहिए जैसे आप ये घूम रही है, ये घूमने वाले को बदल कर लिया। तो मैं मुझे लड़की बता दो, मेरी अच्छी अच्छी वो ठीक ठाक है, तो सर से मैंने छोटी है, अच्छा छोटी है तो थोड़ा सा आता है यार, उसका ख्याल रखो। अब ये है उनका अखलाक और उनकी पूरी दीनी तरबियत कि दुनिया में अगर कामयाब आदमी है तो वो भेड़ भाड़ के जरूर ले रहे हैं, चाहे आपकी मिलती है बच्ची के साथ चाहे नहीं। ये लोग वर्ल्डली वाइज लोग हैं और इसी बुनियाद पर उन्होंने अपने लिए को
क्रिटिसाइज करते हैं या जिसके लिए रेजिस्टेंस मोहम्मद इलियास की किताब में हमें मिलती है वो ठीक होगा या नहीं। ये मैं एज एन ओपन एंडेड क्वेश्चन छोड़े जाती हूँ बिकॉज ऑफ कोर्स वी आर गोइंग टू लाइक गेट टुगेदर क्वार्टरली एंड वी आर गोइंग टू एक्सप्लोर इट फर्दर। एफ्रो अमेरिकन या अफ्रीकन लिटरेचर, be it Abbas Aidu, be it Doris Lessing, be it Ben Okri, be it Chinua Achebe, they utilize the format, they utilize the linguistic intricacy which Professor Yahu pointed out, and I appreciate that she did. Language का revival क्या उसी तहजीब या उसी जुबान में तर्जुमा करने से हो सकता है जिसको आप criticize करते हैं? That is just one comment, come question I leave here. I am really thankful as an organizer and of course as moderator of this panel discussion. The panel discussion point of views. I really appreciate that you all came over on one call notice. And I feel that Naeem Ashraf is lucky to have such an enlightened commentary of his word in front of him. And I thank you all who were sitting here, who were laughing, who were talking, who were listening, who were preparing their minds for another critical discourse. I would like to appreciate them for their tolerance and patience because that was something which he was talking about.